Well, Sable Forks, New York, August 9th, 2004, a picnic table. I don't think the table itself is historic, but we're in an historic part of an historic North Country town, Sable Forks. We have the old school that was established in the 1930s behind us. We have the Veterans Memorial Park just behind us on this direction, and we're on School Street in the sunshine, the first truly beautiful day of August and the first truly beautiful day in several weeks in the North Country. And I would like to say that I had some influence on it, but you all know far better than that. A while ago, a guy knocked on my front door. I don't know where I was, but I wasn't there, and I came home and found a book. And John Ryan made a little note in it saying, "You will interview the lady who wrote this book. She's a friend of mine, and if you don't do it, you're in big trouble." Well, as it just happened, I was going to camp on the St. Lawrence River for our yearly 2-week sojourn, and I took the book with me, and I read it, and it was delicious. And now we get to have a little conversation with a gal who wrote it. How are you, Sandy?
I'm fine. How are you, Gordon?
I'm just doing great. Sandra Sheehan Ullerup, her friends and family know her as Sandy.
Right.
When's the last time you were in Sable Forks?
I was in Sable Forks about 4 years ago to visit my Uncle Irving and Aunt Lucille Sheehan. I was a Sheehan. I lived over on Broad Street. I grew up on Broad Street. So I was here about 4 years ago.
How do you feel when you drive into town these days?
I have mixed emotions because it isn't what it was 40 years ago. My parents are gone, and my parents were a great motivation for me writing this particular book. I'm a psychotherapist by profession, and I started to write a book about my father's Alzheimer's. I had kept a journal about him having and I thought that would be very helpful to people. They could relate to the feelings that the family go through. But every time that I would start it, I would cry. So I started journaling. And one day, my father, in the journal, I was writing about him carrying this great big watermelon out of his garden over here on Broad Street. And that was the inception of the book. So it's
It all started with the watermelon, huh?
It all started with and it's in here. It's one of the segments in the book. Gifts from the country garden. And I'm not going to tell you what happened to the watermelon, but I'll tell you what, we learned that the biggest isn't always the best.
That is true.
So
How far can you spit the seeds? The book is called Johnny and Me, Growing Up Country. It's about Sable Forks. We're going to have a great time talking about it, talking about your childhood here and all the things you've done since. Behind Calvin is the Johnny of the Johnny and Me, and after a little bit we're going to sit him down at this table and pick his brain, and from what I'm told, that'll take hours and hours.
4 minutes.
So stay with us. You'll find out a lot about Johnny and Me.
I do have one thing that I think is interesting. This is the first time in 40 years that Johnny and I have been to Sable Forks together.
Come on.
Together. Really, we've been here separately, but he was in the service in Germany. I lived in Florida for a while. We were on separate, we just didn't make it at the same time. We were in Malone when my grandfather died 31 years ago, but we were not in Sable.
Where is the marching band and the red carpet when we need it?
I know.
Well, we're so glad you're back here together too.
We're glad too.
We're going to get into that memory pot and see what we can pull out. I know it'll be fun. Stay with us. Sandy Ullerup, what a pleasure it is to have you with us here today.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited about this.
I would like, first of all, to have you tell me a little bit about what you do for a living now. We're going to talk a lot about your childhood and where you went when you left here. But
Okay.
You ended up in Asheville, North Carolina,
Right,
where you were a licensed psychotherapist.
right.
And you and I have connections that we've only begun to discover. As our viewers know, I work as a crime victims advocate. I'm on a domestic violence task force. And crime victims everywhere need a lot of assistance. Until they're immersed in the system. They have no
Exactly.
idea what to expect.
Exactly.
And I know this is a part of your life too.
Yes, I want to first say that my father, who is Harry in the book, was a social worker for Essex County when I was growing up as a child. And in those days, they didn't send a check that they could cash for drugs and all the kinds of things that go on. You carried the things to the people. We brought the goods. We provided the services. And I go to take me off my mother's back, give her a break, and every Saturday morning we'd be doing the roads of the North Country here, visiting people, his clients that needed something. So social work, I'm not a social worker, I'm a licensed psychologist, but social work runs in my veins. And one of my internships in Florida, because I graduated from Nova Southeastern, was in domestic violence. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult. And my definition, my personal definition of abuse has narrowed from this to this. I say, like they do in England, zero abuse.
Yeah.
And I know that in North Carolina, even if there's a lot of hollering going on in the house, a lot of domestic squabble, they'll pull children. Children should not have to go, people should not have to go through that sort of thing. So
Well,
I'm very passionate about it.
As a psychologist, and you know the impact that this dysfunction in families has on small children, especially
Exactly.
in the first 3 years of their
Right.
lives. And when you are asked to mop up the aftermath 20 years later, it's a very difficult task. So,
It's a very difficult task to deal with it when it's going on. My friend is a child therapist, and I deal with adolescents a lot.
yeah.
And it mars people. There's no coming back from that 100%. And that's what people need to hear. They need to realize it's not a mild little thing that you can say, I'm sorry, and move on. Because it's very difficult to move on from something like this.
I read with interest that you deal with adolescents because that is such a high at-risk population, and I don't mind saying publicly that our daughter Sharon Pavone works as a child advocate in the local high school in Plattsburgh, dealing with these problem kids who are in that age group, and she's very dedicated too. And we need people like both of you in this world. So you left from here and went to Connecticut, then you went to Florida, then you went to North Carolina.
Right.
That was a rather circuitous route to travel, but you're settled in there, huh?
I'm in the country, north of Asheville, almost to the Tennessee line. But I commute to Asheville, it's 20 minutes.
And you've done some teaching in your lifetime and still do.
Yes, a little bit. I taught catechism, and I've taught at the College for Seniors in North Carolina. I've taught creativity, goal setting, different things that are in keeping with my profession. And I may be teaching a writing class there next winter using the book as the text.
Why not?
Why
By then
not?
it will have sold 100,000 copies
Let's
or more.
hope so.
You know, it's been said that almost everybody has at least one book in them. And part of the problem is to pry it out. I want to know what the genesis of this book was for you. When did you start thinking maybe that your childhood in Ausable Forks would be the good subject for a book?
I'm watching this little fellow out here. He's adorable. I was in Florida at the time thinking an awful lot about my childhood, romanticizing my childhood.
As we all do.
Thinking about different places in Ausable in my mind's eye and different people. And when my father developed the Alzheimer's, it took away from me one more person or one more connection with my childhood. And I remember calling my brother Johnny on the phone and saying, Johnny, please keep well, because if anything happens to you, who will remember Ausable Forks? And I figured the best way to remember Ausable Forks was to put it down. And if you would pardon me, I want to read the dedication.
I wish you would.
To my parents, because whenever I started reading, I really wrote it to settle a lot of my grief issues too. I mean, there's so much. Writing is so good for us. It's so healthy to be able to, because if it's on the page and on the paper, we're no longer struggling and dealing with it. We have to put it down. I've been driven to write ever since I was up at Uncle Irving's farm there, trying to write stories, The Girl from Indiana, and send them into the paper. Never won a contest, but I always wanted to write. Okay, it says, this book is dedicated to our late parents, who loved both Johnny and me with all their hearts. They gave to each of us their time, and in order to accommodate my brother and me, they also gave unstintingly from their meager financial resources. Mama and Daddy, may you both live not only in heaven, but also on these pages, so all of us can see your light. I think we're in a different place in time, and if we could go back to the way it was, even halfway back, if we could be halfbacks, like I am from Florida to North Carolina, half back to the North Country, right? I think we'd have a better world if we all took care of our families.
Well, you know, Calvin and I spend a lot of time on this program, and even when the camera isn't running, which is infrequently, talking about what a special place this North Country is.
It's wonderful.
And this
It
is
formed
another
me.
chapter in that story. And yeah, sometimes younger people say, you always talk about the good old days.
Well, they were good old days.
They were simpler times. And as
Exactly.
we discussed before we started this program today, we all need to just shut off that camera of life once in a while and go back to that first square.
And I think people are ready to do that. I know that I can't, we have the New York Minute, where we could just talk as fast as we can to get it all in. And then we have this new thing where you can just skip everything and move ahead to the end, or move, I forgot what that, it's a new TiVo. Oh, that's a new technique. We can watch basketball games right over the computer now. We can get the Connecticut basketball games down in North Carolina if you got a fast
You
enough
can
cable.
get them on the phone with your brother.
Right.
That's absolutely true. And it's so important for us to just stop once in a while and assess things.
Right.
And that's what we're doing. The good Lord has given us a beautiful sunshiny day in early August 2004 to sit down and talk about your life, about when I use delicious in connection with this book, I'm not kidding, because things like this are dessert for me. Being on this diet for so long, there are a few things I can eat, so get into this book. So you decided to do that, and it is a tribute to your parents and a time in your life that you can never retrieve except in your memory.
In my memory. And I wanted to mention, too, the people that helped me. The cover of this book, Johnny and Me, is an original watercolor done by my friend in North Carolina, Lois Dawsey. And it is based on a watercolor painting that my father did when he took up painting at 69, and he did an oil painting of the Notch with Whiteface Mountain behind. And so I said, I must have that for the book, because my dad did that originally. So she did it. It's not quite the same, but
Beautiful.
it's based on that.
It does evoke memories.
Yeah. I live in the country now, too, And after all my years in the cities, the suburbs, down in Florida, I'm back in the country in a little place called Barnardsville, North Carolina. And when first visit through, Johnny said, boy, sis, it looks like you're back in Osable Forks. A little river runs through, as you cross the little bridge to come up to the house. And there's something about the river, something about the mountains, something about the energy of all of that.
And it's especially poignant here in the North Country
Exactly.
because we have lots of beautiful bodies of water. I spent a weekend at the Glasgow family reunion on Fern Lake.
My uncle's on Fern Lake.
I hadn't returned there for 40 years. I was blown away by how it's changed, but how beautiful it is and how pristine still, even with a lot more camps and homes there. And our glorious Lake Champlain, and as you call it in the book, Lake Chateauguay, Chateauguay Lake and Chazy Lake, and the Saranac River that I live 18 inches from. That plagues me only in the spring. But you know what? There's a lot to be said about growing up near water and living near water. And that's a whole topic we could spend time on, but I think it's good for us.
I used in the foreword the river as the metaphor for my life.
Exactly.
And I'm very connected to natural beauty and natural bodies of water.
When you start writing a book like Johnny and Me, you thought about it for a while. You told me that. You gave us some of the reasons for writing it. All of the reasons may not unfold until you've sold the first 50,000 copies and you get to reflect on it. And strangely enough, when people read the book, they'll come to you with concepts and ideas and reasons for writing that you never dreamed of. We spend our lifetimes analyzing music and poetry and literature. So I want to know if you just did you have a lesson plan before you began, or did you just start writing?
No, I first want to say that I had a lot of help, and I believe that my father, my mother, and all my balcony crowd, my relatives and people that loved me that are no longer here, cheered me on, because in rereading things that I had written, it really sounded, it was their voice, you know, it was what they would have said, and I don't know if I can really take credit for that, Gordy. I'm not sure where it all came from. And
I don't take credit for anything.
No, I would do a little bit over here, and then I'd do a composite, and I'd put this paragraph, I'd do a mix and match, a cut and paste, and I had a journal going on the side. I called it my dump journal I had no outline. I had no outline. Yeah, my dump journal. I had absolutely no outline. I just like the river. I went with it. I took it where it took me.
You know,
and then in the end, I put it together, and then I said, do you think chronologically, I asked a couple people that edited for me, do you think chronologically I've, made a big faux pas here anywhere? Or, no, they said, we think it kind of rolls along the way it should sequentially. So it was very difficult to let go of this. The other thing is I finished the rough draft, the first copy, the night before 9/11.
oh my God.
And the next morning, I was on the phone. No, it's true.
Oh.
The first, I'm talking about the first time. That's not that's without the editing. And it took me almost a year because of my profession and because of what happened in this country to get back to the book. Because I haven't done this, I've done a lot of it as I've been working. I'm working on the second book now in this series, and I'm working 3 days a week as a psychotherapist.
At the very end, it says it's to be continued, and so we knew there was going to be another chapter. She took a lesson from Stephen King, didn't she, huh?
I didn't know I did.
Dark Tower series lives on. Well,
the only thing I can tell you is I've written one, I'll give you a little preview on the second book. I've written the segment where Buddy Holly's plane went down.
oh my God.
And I read it to John. I thought he was going to cry right there on the phone.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, the thing is, I've had fun. People have liked it that have read it. And if one person has some peace and learns something or feels good or it helps people to access their memories, that was a plus. I never thought that would happen. People have accessed their own memories by reading this book.
They can't help it. That's what a book like this does for people.
I'm happy about that, though, Gordy.
And
I'm happy about that.
many times, this is one of our great philosophies for Calvin and myself in doing this program called Our Little Corner, is to get people thinking about their own childhoods, to talk about days that are past,
Right.
to take little trips down memory lane. And I'm sure that before we finish this program, people will be nudging their husbands, wives, and significant others and saying, we're getting the book, and then we're going to take a ride to Ausable Forks, and we're going to see what's left from all that.
Feeks is left, and Feeks is taking the book. That's the one thing that's left that was here initially.
Isn't it amazing? Now, before we go one instant further in this interview,
The church is left.
and the church is here behind us, but
Churches.
the church is one foundation. Remember that song?
Yes, I
It's
do.
right there, and it's
Yes,
behind us, and it is
And it's
the
always behind us.
it
and
is
in
the
front of us.
bulwark in our lives. Sure.
Right.
Okay. This puzzled me, and you will, I'm sure, answer it forever and ever. Why change the name of your hometown
Okay.
to River Forks?
Okay.
Was that a conscious effort, did you say?
Well, I changed a lot of names because I didn't want to. I wasn't so afraid of being sued, but I was afraid of offending it. No, I was
I know what
afraid
you
of
mean.
offending people. Let me explain to you what I am going to answer the question honestly. If you go to Sears and you have your picture taken and they send the proofs and you're not happy with the pictures, oh, that's not me, I don't like this, look at what they've done. I don't want to offend it. My purpose is not to offend anyone. But the reason I named the town River Forks was because allegorically it works. It reaches a larger, it could be, I've said in my foreword that this could have taken place in any town, USA, during the 40s, but it did not. And River Forks was such a sweet name. It just really spoke to me. It worked. And other people said that it worked for them because it was such a generic name for a town. And it was true. The river is here and the river forks. So I certainly didn't, you know.
It's just interesting.
It's a very Romane clef, you
Yeah.
know. I mean, it's
But you decided, as you say in your disclaimer in the beginning, to change other things too, and to add a little bit here and there.
right.
And
Right.
as all
Little
of my,
detail.
as my wife especially, and my circle of family and friends know, I love to embellish stories.
Well, you can't
Just
help it if you're a storyteller.
give me a storyline and let me run with it.
Exactly. As an example, I spent yesterday at the Malone County Fair. Okay, the Franklin County Fair. I was there yesterday. I haven't been back to that
Or as
fair.
we always called it, the Malone Fair.
Okay, the Malone Fair, and my mother was Sansone. You know, she lived.
Oh my goodness! Of course, we talked
Sansone's restaurant.
how we.
My granddad
So much
was-
in the book, and so that touched me deeply.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
And the thing is, I have a whole segment in here on the county fair. And part of it was absolutely true, but you had to add creative details, right? And I changed the name of the town to Ballard Falls because I got in a lot of trouble going up to Ballard Falls without permission. Ballard Mill in Malone without permission. And so I really liked that. You know, I was having fun. I was being creative. What else can I say? You know how writers are creative.
It's
If we
wonderful.
don't have the answer, we provide one.
It's just that it's not
But
often.
most of it is true.
Oh, I know the basic storyline.
The basic
is
story
true.
is true.
The important things from your childlike point of view, growing up here in Osable Forks, are a part of your essence. They're part of who you are now. We're all.
And it's very important that I say that I am that little girl from Osable Forks. And my husband laughs at me and he says, "You're always trying to pass yourself off as a country girl." And I said, in my heart, I am. I connect with people and with country people because that's who I am. That's who I
Let's
am.
talk for just a moment
It-
about your husband and family. We didn't mention them earlier.
I have
We
a
should.
wonderful husband. Bruce. He's not here. He's home minding the store while I'm up here with Johnny.
So that's the substance of your family? Do you have kids?
No, we have children. This is my second marriage, and so I have three. I have a daughter, two sons, and a stepson. But we consider all four of them our children, and we have four grandchildren, and we don't differentiate. Which I believe. Let me say this plug: if you ever have a blended family, you have to treat the spouse's children as though they're your own, or it's the end of the marriage.
Gee, Calvin, I don't know if that rings true. I should tell you here and now, since we've only met today, that when I met my wife, she had 11 kids,
What?
and I had 2.
Oh, so you have
And
13?
yes, we did blend our family, and we raised those 13 and then 2 more when a couple of our kids were killed in auto crashes. And so now we have 20 grandchildren and 15 great-grandchildren.
Congratulations.
So yeah, blended family. We'll write that chapter of your next book for you.
Okay. I'm intimate, and I love the grandchildren, and I have great nieces and nephews now. I mean, family is important to me. I guess if people want to know about me, the most important thing is I'm all about relationships.
Yeah.
You know, and I spent so much time, Gordon, in my own childhood and everybody else's. It was a natural thing that I would write a book about my childhood, and it's the funnest thing I've done. I know funnest isn't a correct English word,
It's
but
a
it
good
was the
word. I love
funnest
it.
thing I've done for myself. I would say that this has been more exciting than grad school, or maybe because it was a long time ago, I don't know, but it just, because nobody told me how to do it or what to do or what to say, I could just do what I wanted to do. That's the blessing of creativity.
Is it true catharsis for you, do you think? Is it a way to flesh out some of those memories and put them in some kind of perspective?
Well, yes, because one of the things is my mom and dad I know where they are besides heaven. They're on these pages because these are the real true parents of my childhood. There's no doubt when I read something about what somebody said, that's what they would say. And I checked it out with Johnny. He says, absolutely, you've got that one right, bingo. You know, So a catharsis, it's a very bittersweet thing, nostalgia is. And this is what people, there's a sweet side of nostalgia. Like when I was at the Malone Fair and at the Sansone's restaurant last night eating dinner with my brother and John Ryan and the people we were with, it was sad not to see my grandfather come through. But it was wonderful to be in his kitchen again with his son that runs the restaurant now, and to know that the family recipe has been passed down. When we get to be a certain age, and I certainly am all of that age, Erickson has the stage of generativity versus stagnation. And I prefer to be generative. I don't want to stagnate. I want to leave something behind. So I've saved 4 of these books for the grandchildren. I'm going to write to them right now. I'm going to sign them, put them in the vault. I may not be here when they read them. I want them to know how much I love them. Because love is the one thing that we carry across. And the other thing I'm really proud of, there is the only 4-letter word in this book of any consequence is love. There is no, I think I said hell once.
You did? I missed that.
Yeah, I
see.
did. It was at that B movie I went to that I wasn't supposed to go to, and I got in a lot of trouble for.
That was a charm. Did that really happen? That's such a charming piece of the book.
And it absolutely happened, and that's the way my father handled it. And that was the end of my lying, and that is the biggest parenting lesson in this book. Read The Big Lie. And the way I built up to it, the way that I decided that I could get away with this. And that's all true. Now that's all true. That part is true.
In light of what we know about how movies are presented today and how kids are sneaking in ways that you and I never dreamed of back in the 1940s and early 50s, it adds a dimension of humor. But wow, the theater. You have to remember that I grew up in a very staunchly religious family. My father was a traveling evangelist in the Nazarene church, and movies were forbidden.
You couldn't go at all.
Not at all. As an early child, no. We would go and see the newsreels at Radio City, and that was it in New York City. So, boy,
wow.
When I got to sneak into movies later on in the first drive-in theaters around Messina, that was a really big deal. The best part of reading this book and the best part of literature in general is it's very easy for the reader, if a book is written well, to stand there in the writer's shoes. And everybody had a childhood of some kind. Most of the people who read this book in the North Country have grown up in a rural area such as Ausable Forks, and so they can put those shoes on and walk down the same streets in their mind that you walk down, and yes, it will spark their own memories of their own childhood, their own conflicts with neighbors, and girls protecting their brothers and things like that.
I agree with you 100%, with one exception. One of the things that has been a little bit sad for me about the book is that everyone did not have the wonderful childhood that I had. I mean, my childhood, sure, a few things happened, but in the world of childhoods, it was pretty idyllic.
You made that very clear in the book, yeah.
And people that have been abused as children that have read the book, and I have clients and different people that have read the book, and they said, gee, we came from an alcoholic home. We didn't have that. And I feel so sorry. But part of my devotion in life is to believe that on some level we can recapture. We can have it's never too late to have a happy childhood. We may
I
never,
love that. I think I'll use that line.
It's never too late to have a happy childhood. It may not be exact, because I think the child in us should every day. We're playing right here. Every day we should be out playing, doing something that's fun. God made us that way. And I don't know how we got off track on that one.
Don't we so often take ourselves too darn seriously?
Like we're running things.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, like we have control over anything.
Like we have control. I mean, I may have control over whether I eat meatloaf, hamburger, or a veggie burger tonight. Beyond that, what control? I don't really have any control, except over my attitude, except over how I face things, And I try, even people that have had the very worst things happen to them, not to live as a victim. Because if you live as a victim, your victimizer wins. They win.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
Right?
so many choices that we can make in life. Your childhood here in Osable Forks was a good thing for you in retrospect, and many times we tend to bury the truly unpleasant experiences, but you bring up a few of the unpleasant experiences
Yes, I
of
do.
your childhood
Yes, I
because
do.
it's a part of the compendium. It's a part of who
Exactly.
you are.
Exactly.
And that's okay.
I do. And in my second book, I have a couple of very sad things that I have to bring up. And I find myself writing around these things. I was saying to John Ryan this morning, I'm writing around these things. And that's the way I write. I write in circles, and somehow it comes out in a straight line eventually. You know.
But that's okay. Yeah, we talk around the bad things in our lives,
And I
but
know I've got to get to that.
you got to visit it.
I have to visit it. I have to put it down. I have to put it down there on the paper and move on. Because everything isn't funny.
No, you got that right. Did you do any writing, any serious writing before this? Did you write any poetry or music?
Yes.
Or
I won a poetry contest, junior Catholic daughters poetry contest when I was 6, going to Osable. You know, at night when all the lights are out, I close my little eyes up tight and think of heaven's light.
Oh,
I
God.
throw a good night kiss to God and say to him good night. And off to dreamland I shall go and dream of angels bright. And an interesting on the side story about that.
Age 6?
Age 6.
You're melting my heart.
The nun that helped me to get it into proper cadence. 3 nuns came through the Malone Fair yesterday, and they knew my nun, Sister Rosero, that had helped me here.
Come on.
They were from the Sisters of St. Joseph, and people that came through knew my mother, who died of lymphoma 21 years ago. So it was a very interesting day yesterday.
Isn't it? It's a continuum.
It's a continuum.
Just as a very brief aside, not to interject any other aspect of my life, but when Calvin and I started doing this program, we were drawn to the Malone Fair. We walked in the door, and a guy walked up to me and shook my hand and said, "Gordy, I haven't seen you in a while." And it just happened to be a childhood friend of mine whom I hadn't seen since I had last attended the Malone Fair at age 18 in 1955.
No
And it was as if
coincidences.
we just walked out, said goodbye, and said hello again. See what I mean?
Yes.
So that must have been neat for you. I don't want to give away the whole book, but I want you to. I want to
No, we're
let.
going to sell it, Gordy. We're
No.
not going to give it away.
I want people to know that Sansone's Restaurant and the Malone Fair was a huge segment of what this book and your childhood was all about. It's all about family. It's all about unbelievably hard work. And
I didn't do much of it. I left that to Johnny.
we're going to find out from John whether you've been telling us the absolute truth here when he comes over to talk to us in a few minutes. But I want to know what the reaction, good, bad, and indifferent, has been to this book so far.
The book has not yet it's just now getting the exposure that it needs, because it takes time to market. And I have some things I set up in Carolina when I get back, and I have some things in Florida for the fall. But people that have read it and bought it, and I've sold several copies, you know, there's been movement with the book. I mean, it's not flying. We housing it, putting it in different places, and you hate to do that until you get the publicity part. But the people that have read the book, I've had nothing but pretty good comments. People have liked it.
Even your friends who would always tell you the truth.
Even my friends that would always tell me the truth.
And it's got to, wherever we are right now in our lives, it's got to make you feel good to have done this.
Yes, it was a life goal. It was a life goal. And one of the things that I encourage my clients and people to do is, you know, the clock is running. If there's something that you want to do, you really need to do it. And this is kind of like my trip around the world. Rather than go around the world, you know, I wanted to do this. And I love writing, and I've got to balance it now with my other career, which is psychotherapy, because I refuse to give it up. Now that I love every part of it.
You know, I'm one of those people who, in spite of my tremendously advanced age, insist on grabbing for that gold ring every day.
Right.
And so, like you, I'm balancing several different things at the same time. And every moment, Calvin and I discussed this on the ride up here, every moment is delicious. We don't know how many minutes we have, so we have to do something in those minutes.
That's right.
You don't think
And
of a legacy, but you think of doing something that's good for you and everybody else.
One of the things that I know is true is when you speak, when you write, when you have an exchange with another person. My father used to tell me, they won't tell you what they're thinking all the time, Sandra, but you can affect other people. You may never know it. I don't think we're supposed to know it because we go around with blue helium balloons for heads. You know, I don't think we're supposed to know all the good that we do here, but let's pray that we do some. You know, and I figured that, I told you the story about the woman with the macular degeneration.
Mm-hmm.
Her daughter reads her a segment. She bought the book and reads her. She's a client of mine, reads her the segment, one segment every night. I mean, that alone is worth it. When I picture in my mind that little lady that can't see anymore to read, she does all of her books on tapes, having her daughter read it to her. That's just really important to me.
You know, like you say, none of us know the full impact of what we do. We get responses from people, and I think you made an excellent point, as you've made many excellent points since we sat down at this picnic table in Osable Forks with Sandy Ellerup. I think it's important to realize that we impact people on many different levels, and I believe passionately that our thoughts and our fervent prayers affect people, and that goes beyond what we write about them in books or newspaper columns or television shows. So
absolutely.
I think it's something we ought to think about. Our deepest thoughts affect other people.
Our deepest thoughts, our deepest prayers, our deepest wishes for people. I woke up this morning, we have a cousin who is married to a man who's dying of cancer. We visited him yesterday. You know, we took time off from the fair. And I woke up thinking about this fella this morning. And I think part of being human, there's no way that we're not going to get out of it alive, and we're not going to get out of it unaffected. So the only thing we can do is join together and help each other through. That's our purpose in this world. And then wait on the other side and be part of the balcony crowd and cheer the others that are still here doing their work.
Let's talk for just a little minute about the academic part of this book. Did you have any idea how you were going to publish it when you were writing, or did you determine that after? Did you send it to other publishers?
No.
Try to get an agent? What did you do?
No.
I'm going to do it myself no matter what?
I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to do it myself. And the reason I did it myself was I heard so many horror stories about the publishing company and how they'll send you a royalty check and then you owe it back to them and then some plus. And you have to do all of your own marketing. Even a small publishing company that takes you on, they own your book. You're lucky if you get 2 cents on the dollar. Oh, the thing I didn't tell you, Gordy, that's really important is a portion of this book after the cost of it is we have a new nonprofit agency starting down there called the Harry Hope House. It's on the website. The website is, I'll have Johnny tell you, but what it is it's a home for children from 0 to 3 that have been abused, neglected, unwanted, or going to be put up for adoption. And so the proceeds from this book are going for the Harry. And
Bless
Harry,
you.
Named after my father, and
Bless
Hope is
you.
my granddaughter's middle
Bless
name.
Bless you for
And the
all of
book
that.
will sell the house, and the house will sell the book. And Johnny is coming to Asheville next year to do a great big fundraiser. We're going to do a 50s party with the second book, and he's going to be the DJ.
Stacks of whack. All right, it's your turn. Get over here, John. John's been sitting in the shade. We've just allowed ourselves a little bit of a comment from the Peanut Gallery, but the Peanut Gallery is
the Peanut Gallery couldn't keep its mouth shut any longer.
Moved in with us here on our front row seats at a picnic table. For those of you who just turned on your television sets, shame on you. We've been going at this for a while now. We're at a picnic table near the Veterans Park in Osable Forks on School Street. In front of us is that wonderful church that's mentioned so much in this book called Johnny and Me, Growing Up Country. Behind us is the old school. Okay. Behind us is the church. Behind Calvin is the school. And on either side, you're on your own. It's like my wife saying, that left, go that way, go that left. We kid each other a lot. So you're the Johnny part of Johnny and Me, huh?
Yeah, I've been told I'm the star of the book. People ask, where's Johnny?
Well,
So I have to make the appearances with her.
The hat and the shades tell the whole story, John, so you know.
Well, the shades I need because I wear glasses, and the hat I need because, unfortunately, I spent too much time in the sun playing tennis since I left Sable, and now I get marked up a little too much, so I try to take the protection that everybody should think about.
Well, what a beautiful day
Oh,
to sit
couldn't
here
be
and
better.
do this interview.
Couldn't be better. Couldn't be more beautiful. And the North Country looks so lush. I understand you've had a lot of rain up here this season, but at least it's paid off. Things look pretty darn nice for our visit.
The ground isn't too soggy beneath us now. Of course, we could fall into a sinkhole any minute. But it is a good day, and we relish our sunshine here, unlike those people who spend time in Florida where it never rains. And
Oh, and when it does, though, it's terrible.
yeah, I know. Okay. And that's a comment for the Chamber of Commerce and whatever place you lived at. John, how many times have you been back to Sable Forks?
A little more frequently than my sister because my proximity is only out of Connecticut. I've been up here several times to visit friends. I went to school across the lake. Instrumental in all this happening here in the North Country is a dear close friend of mine. Extended family, we prefer to relate to these matters. John Ryan, his wife, who are hosting us for this book tour. So I've been up many, many times to see John. I come through Sable with some frequency, but when you add it up over the years, not a lot. I've seen John a lot, different venues for college events and at his home. But I've been here often enough to see Sable make the changes where for Sandra, it's quite changed. My last visit up here was just a couple of years ago. So I had an occasion I had to drive through town and go out the other way, and so I had a chance to see the differences here.
I'm not going to explain to people precisely why you had to leave town as young children, but that's in the book. I want people to read it. But suffice to say that our childhood view of things, including the size, the length of streets, bridges.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Far different.
Yeah, this town was huge. It was megagopolis when I was a kid. That ride that she recounts there of my little fire engine from the house over in Broad Street to the church, my mother got me just before the church. That was like the Indy 500. Probably lasted 2 hours. It really lasted about 4 minutes.
About 4 weeks because you lost your fire truck.
Oh yeah, and I think using that story as a perfect example. While I collaborated with Sandra and helped enrich the memories back and forth in phone conversations, almost endless conversations for about a year and a half, I do want people to understand that the genesis of the book is absolute truth. Each one of those stories came from reality. They happened. I remember these things, the variety show and the other things that you mentioned here this morning. And there's things that I don't remember that Sandra pointed out to me driving through town, that obviously I was a little bit too young to remember, but this book is founded in actual fact. Its embellishments are only through her skill sets that allow it to be woven into an interesting and catching book to read.
You were pretty young when you left here. How old, 7?
I was just 7 when we left, yeah.
So before the camera started, we were looking past the school down the end of the street, and you said when you came back, you said, whoa, I thought that was a dead-end street. I don't remember that other bridge over there.
Absolutely, I do not, because there's been no reinforcement. The only times that I've been in Sable to visit relatives here, as Saunders mentioned, have been basically to pass through. Sable may have been where I started, but it didn't remain a destination in its own right. It's more embedded in the limited memories that I have that are, brought out here in the book, because not much more of my life played out in Sable. She was here a few years longer, and of course her recollections are much more founded and much more stable than mine. I might not remember, like the bridge had a superstructure when I was a kid, and it's changed. I can remember those kinds of things. I can remember the gas station that had the pumps right out near the road that is referenced here as Pasno's gas. But I don't remember everything as completely as my sister did because I was that much younger. But the storylines are factual. I remember each of those things that reflect on me in the book.
But are you, how long between the time you left at 7
Yeah.
was it before you came back?
Well,
how long would you guess?
Probably when I was younger, rather frequently, because my parents would take their summer vacation up in Malone, and
yeah, sure.
yeah, and so for a couple of years, we
our teen years.
yeah, until the family didn't vacation together again. So maybe for 6 or 7 years, we would make an annual sojourn.
Oh, so
Okay.
it wasn't like 20 years and then you came back.
No. The reinforcements were there because of the family connections, and then of course, as I mentioned, I did my college across the lake at St. Michael's in Winooski, Vermont, and there was some coming back and forth during that period as well. I've never been completely unbundled from Sable. I've always
love it.
I'm not. I guess I'm not nearly as the word escapes me right now, but it's not like I've been away a long time. But the features in the book, the feelings in the book, and many of the people in the book have been away from us for a long time. And I have to agree with the comments that were being made earlier about a kinder, gentler time. A lot of people will say that there were tons of problems in the 40s and 50s, and there were. But maybe the problems that we have today numerically are greater in raising children. And I can remember being left to my own devices, even in Connecticut as a young boy. You could travel around with your friends and pals. You didn't have to check in every 4 or 5 or 6 hours. I wouldn't let my grandson out of my sight in a grocery store.
How often do we talk about
and
this?
and in this book, in this town, you could do that because the neighbor would bring the child home.
One of the lines that I had in the book was that Mama had more eyes than God because she had so many
Absolutely.
Snoops around.
All-
I mean, you couldn't
all
get away
mamas
with
do.
anything.
Yeah.
All of our kids thought my wife had those
Yeah.
prototypical eyes in the back of her head, but parents knew.
Oh, absolutely.
And the kids were taught to be more self-sufficient.
Oh, you were encouraged.
They went on bicycle rides and hikes and,
Fun.
day
And-
trips.
And you could do that here in Sable and all the many other towns that this is emblematic of. You may still be able to do it in Sable, although I would have a fear factor. But my point is that comes from just simply being older and exposed to too much more than what I was exposed to at the time this book relates to.
Two points I want to make. One of them is visiting our hometowns. And it's unfortunate when we leave a place where we spent some really good times in our youth and don't come back for 40 years, as I did to a little hometown of mine in Westchester County called Thornwood. And when I did finally return for a tricentennial family reunion, I was tremendously disappointed because all my we left at that same age. I was 7 years old, and talk about glorifying your memories, creating these wonderful images in your mind. When I went back, I was tremendously disappointed.
Yeah, your expectations grow, and I think maybe that's the word I was looking for. Having returned more often than my sister, my expectations were quite different. They were more grounded in something that happened more recently, so I wasn't expecting to see the Hollywood Theater closed. It's been closed a long time. But you're absolutely right. You can remember things differently, but obviously it's important to try to be factual and understand the changes, and you have to go back to see that.
And you know what? The rural aspects of this town survive, so it's still a nice, peaceful, small North Country town. So we can talk about it in those terms and relate what happened to Sandy and you when you were youngsters.
Yes.
I want to know what your input was along the way. Did she say, John, I'm going to write a book and you're in it, whether you like it or not?
Pretty much. She says, "I have this in it. I have this in me. We're going to do this." I certainly encouraged her because I understand the depth of her talent. My sister has been more a late bloomer. I've gotten to the point where I'm coasting a lot, but my sister is still producing
forget the
tremendous
breaks,
and copious amounts of work. But we did collaborate on long phone calls frequently, and I listened to all the book as it was being produced. My wife along with me. My wife and I have been together over 38 years, known my sister 42 years, obviously, since I first dated her. And we felt comfortable that what Sandra has placed here is a palatable product that is designed to help people enjoy and to reflect. I think there's something on the back cover. It caused one critic to ponder his own growing up a spell, and you alluded to that a little bit.
Name of the game.
And while it's intensely personal for me, I have to admit this, that at just a basic level, it's a very entertaining book, and probably something that you'd have to be too much in a hurry not to be able to enjoy. I had a friend take this on a long plane ride. He says, "I finally read your sister's book," and he knows my sister, and he was thrilled to have a copy of it. And he said to me, but he says, "That's not all true, is it?" And I said, "Fred, I have to tell you, the one thing about the book, it's true." She couldn't possibly remember that. I said, "No, you don't know my sister well enough. She remembers this, and it's true."
There's this is an aside, but it's connected. You're a psychologist, and I work as a crime victims advocate, and unfortunately, bullying in neighborhoods and schools is just as much or more of a factor in our world as it was when you all were growing up here, and you spent some time talking about that with your brother, and that had to be a little bit heart-wrenching to grind that out and put it into words for you.
It was, but Johnny got picked on when lots of times when we were young, and kids pick on kids. That's a natural kid thing to do. But the thing is, I wrote it in such a humorous way, and my Uncle Irving Sheehan was involved in that, hovering with the Oldsmobile and big, and the big fight, the big preparation. So I think the thing about this book is that it has the voice of an 8-year-old, which came from some training, some CEUs I took in Haikomi training, where you have to come from a certain, and I started writing in the 8-year-old voice. I hope I can come out of that. I hope I'm not like Fonzie, that'll be Fonzie forever. I hope I can come out of it. But anyway, the point is, an 8-year-old sees it differently. The poignant parts for me were the deaths and the losing Uncle Fred Torrance.
Oh, of course.
And, I mean, that to this day is doesn't have the closure that I need for that. They were wonderful.
Sometimes it takes a lifetime to put the cap on stories like that.
I think it's very important to recognize that what we do with our losses is we live with our losses. We never really get over stuff. This business of, it's 2 years have passed, get over it. We don't get over things. We incorporate them into who we are. And we live with it. And it molds us.
She sounds like the mirror of things I tell people every day. I told you we were on the same wavelength.
We're on the same wavelength.
But I've been dying to know if you agree with your sister that you put on the first pair of boxing gloves ever in Ausable Forks. Come on.
I would have been too young to authenticate that statement. But the fact that I put them on, that I had them, and I'm not absolutely certain where they exist today, but I can remember them still being near me in my adult life. Maybe they didn't make a move with me somewhere, but
is it that? Oh.
And I certainly remember the confrontations that were had, and my uncle then saying, "Okay, I think we've had enough," and whipped me in the car, and we went on home. And there was a little bit of blood, which of course we're not allowed to even begin to think about in today's world. But some of the sheltering that goes on.
On the wall of this church.
Oh, did it really?
It really did. The Episcopal Church, does it still have the stone wall down there?
I think it does.
Yeah.
I have to
right
tell
at
you.
the wall it happened.
I have to tell you a funny story in relation to that boxing episode, and of course the fight that ensued. I was picking up a grandchild in a daycare center last year, and the older one I had already picked up from school. And as the little one come running down the hall, he gave her a straight arm like this, and she went straight down the floor. And I looked at my grandson and I said, what are you, stupid? What are you? What are you? In a question. Okay, so it's properly phrased and everything. And I told him, sit in the chair. I picked up the little one, and all the little other faces are looking out from the little rooms. My daughter called me the next day and told me that I would not be allowed to go in and pick up the grandchild anymore because I had traumatized all the other children with using the S word, stupid. And just so that you know that I have a humorous side to me, it's an ill wind that doesn't blow any good. When I did have to go pick up my granddaughter in the future, they would bring her out a side door to me, put her right in the car and buckle her up so I never even had to leave the car. I thought to myself, this can't be too bad. But I'll tell you, what kind of a world are we in when we shelter kids from the word stupid? I mean, it was just an interesting concept. So, fights happen and other things, ensue in the course of growing up.
Now we're worrying about 9/11 and terrorism, and gee, all we had to worry about as a kid living in the New York City area near Long Island was German submarines off the coast of Long Island.
Oh yeah.
Or the end of the world.
Or the end of the world, yeah.
That was a big thing.
Yeah, 1939. I was 2 years old. I want to know what you did with your life after Sable Forks.
Well, the most remarkable thing was probably that I gathered around me a wonderful wife, and we've had children, friends abound everywhere. I'm more into relationships than I am into possessions. I have my share of them, but out of Sable, grew up and went to school and high school in West Hartford, Connecticut, college, as I mentioned earlier, in Vermont, where I met a cadre of wonderful associates who are all extended family to me now. And then after military service in the late 60s, I joined an insurance company in Connecticut and was retired from them some time ago. And I'm just kind of out there winging it now. Doing book tours.
I don't know that you shouldn't start your own book this afternoon and just call it Retort.
Well, when my sister started the book, formed her company to publish it, etc., she had another project going, which she hasn't referred to here. It's a more clinical book that she's writing with an associate, and they'll publish. And she says, you ought to get all your poetry together, and we can do an anthology of some of the writings that you've done. I only had two very productive periods. One was when I was in the military, and I was stationed in Maryland, working at a job that basically lent to me the idea that I should probably be getting out of the service pretty soon. So I had time to write poetry, and after that period, a number of years went by, about 25 or 30, and when I recently retired, I had another year of morning thoughts. But I cannot write with the descriptions that she writes, but I have no problem putting things into rhyme and rhythm, and so I guess I'm the other side of the coin, and maybe someday we might have a book out, a little anthology on poetry.
Her reverence for you and the fact that you're her brother is shown in the title of this book, Johnny and Me, so it has to be considered a collaboration, right?
This book?
Yeah.
I ran by him as I did it. We talked about different events, but I did the actual writing.
Did you really read every word to him on the telephone?
Yes, I did.
Here we go.
Several times, as though he was hearing it for the very first time.
Imagine what your phone bills must have been like.
No, I have an AT&T deal.
Oh. I love it.
$29.99 plus tax. You can call anywhere in the United States.
But did he ever say, no, you can't say that?
No.
You never said that? You better not bring that up.
I found the book entertaining on the reads. Occasionally I might make a reference more in the new book that you're doing because of the timings and the songs and what years they were out. This book here was basically an opportunity to provide for her an outlet. and obviously I was there, and I found nothing objectionable there. I found nothing that was a half truth or worse. Basically, these things, especially as they relate to me, are as factual as I remember them. There are other instances in the book that where she's working with girlfriends and stuff, and obviously I might not have been at that tea party. So, well, I find it entertaining.
One of them that I didn't
Oh
write
yeah,
about.
well you didn't write that one in.
I didn't write about that tea party.
Yeah, I wasn't supposed to be at it. My parents tied me up. We might as well tell them it's not in the book.
Let me tell you.
And
at
I was
my
good
fourth-
at getting.
my
I was
fourth
good at
birthday
getting
party,
out of clothes
they-
and knots. So I arrived, butt ass, you know what, right in the middle of her tea party. But
I
she decided.
love it.
She decided that one didn't need to be in the book.
Oh,
and
I
I'm
think it
happy.
ought to be in the next book.
Oh.
So, there were good times.
Oh, they
And
were,
there
they
were-
were wonderful. We all as a family were quite happy here. And I have to tell you, I think that while we were happy as a family after we left here, I don't think we were ever happier than what we were here. My mother's family is all still in Malone, New York. She had to make a big move to leave, to go down to Connecticut and never be able to come back but once a year to see her beloved father and brothers and sisters.
It was a tough move.
And it was tough.
You expressed that.
And
yeah.
you make your adjustments, but the word idyllic started somewhere in the middle of this taping, and it applies to that time back then too. It was idyllic.
People loved each other. People cared. People watched out for one another. And the town did have 1,000 pair of eyes watching.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And in reading this book, I was taken back to my childhood, not down there in Westchester County, but into a little community called Messina Center, which is not too far from Messina, on the Grass River, where I spent the years that you both have reflected in this book. And unlike Osable Forks, that little town has remained essentially unchanged for 70 or 80 years. And because children and grandchildren live in the same houses,
Yes.
the same names are on the mailbox. And so
it's
every
phenomenal.
year when we go
Phenomenal.
up there, I used to pile the kids in the car saying we're going to Messina Center on our pilgrimage, and they would say, oh no, not again. We don't care who lived in that house, and we don't care about... But you know what? For me, it was great. It was just absolutely delightful to go back and have all those memories. I should have talked all of it onto a tape recorder, but I didn't. And you did it here in your book. Have you had any reaction from some of the kids that you grew up with? Have any of the kids that you grew up with here in Osable Forks read your
They
book
haven't
yet?
read it yet. I'm going to
Well,
have
come
I'm
on.
going to have a reading at the library tomorrow.
Are you?
The Osable Library at 2:00. So I expect a lot of people different people that are in the book will probably, I know my aunt's bringing, That's important. It's an important place to do readings, libraries.
You mentioned, one or both of you mentioned Ardo Monaco, our dear friend, the late Ardo Monaco. I don't know what the connection
The
was.
connection is that he was a friend of my Uncle Irving's, and they were connected somehow he was at our 4th of July picnics a lot, doing the fireworks. So,
Oh.
and we used to get passes to see, that's what I mean. We got passes to my aunt, Seal in the book, was a gnome for the North Pole, and she went on the toy lift.
Now we're getting into it.
Okay. She went on the toy lift, and Ardo Monica used to come to the park. He was a very good friend of my Uncle Irving's. So, the thing that I want to say that I think is so important, and I said this to Johnny when I was living in Florida, we were having lunch together. I said, Johnny, do you think we were poor when we were kids? He said, no. He says, Mother would have never permitted that.
I love it. What a line.
The truth of the matter was, economically, because my daddy was a social worker, and he played cards with Dr. Sprans, and they'd come up after they closed the off. I mean, and Uncle Fred Torrance was socioeconomically, we were at a different place in town. But that is not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that poverty is a state of mind, and we probably were poor. But when you got passes to go to the land of make-believe, and your aunt was running around on a helicopter, for the toy lift to 13 states, I mean, how poor is that?
We
and
were
your
rich in
grandfather,
life
we were
experiences.
Rich. We were so rich. We didn't know what we had.
Well, you
And
know,
that comes across in the
you've
book.
mentioned it here, and I've mentioned the Glasgow family reunion where we
Right.
spent a lot of time yesterday talking about how relationships should take the premier place in our lives over our possessions. I'm a pack rat, and I have a lot of possessions. But if they were all gone tomorrow morning, they wouldn't be nearly as important as sitting here today and meeting both of you charming people and talking about those things, because it's those relationships that impact us forever and ever and ever. If we can go back and meet our old friends, I don't know how often you do it, but I've been so fortunate in the last year by pure serendipity to contact a couple of my best friends in college, people I worked with at a Western village, and people here and there and everywhere, and make those contacts. Thank God for email, right?
It works.
Somebody can say, I read your column, and yeah, don't you remember me? We were 9 years old together, and so on.
It's very,
those
it's very
relationships.
important to have a personal history and to keep developing a personal history.
You know, I want to know, how far into the next book are you?
Probably about a quarter.
No kidding. That far
Maybe,
already.
maybe.
Is it just, as you said, to be continued? Does it pick up where this one left off?
Yes, it does.
And how many do you vision? 2, 3, 4?
Oh, books. I'd like to do one, Chronicles of River Forks. Pick out people and do chronicles. I may do that. But I have a professional book about communicating with our adult children that I need to do after the second book.
Is that the one John was?
Yes, yes.
Tell me a little more about that.
The working title is Second Chance, Communicating with Your Adult Children, because people have a horrific time communicating with their adult children. And so I'm writing, it's not a textbook, it's a very readable book, and I'm not that far into it yet. The chapters delineated, and I've just finished a chapter called The Power of Silence. Anyone who has adult children can relate to, the subtitle of that would be Know When to Keep Your Mouth Shut, right? And John gives me he's given me some very, he calls me up and he'll give me some quotes, some things that he thinks, platitudes. He told me that what he does with his adult daughter now is he stands and waits. He said if he's called to the fire, he goes with his bucket. The bucket brigade goes down. And if he's told that he's not needed, he stands by with his bucket, and that's so it'll be partly humorous, but hopefully it will help people to understand that this is one group of people where we all need to be together, because adult children, the problem with being a parent is we're still a parent and we still think they're little, but they really don't need, we think they need our help. They don't want our help. So what do you do about that and still maintain a relationship? So I need to write that book.
Well, that's good, and that's very interesting. You know, something just dawned on me. We've spent a lot of time talking about Graves Mansion, the wonderful mansion on the back street here. You didn't mention that mansion when you were a child. Do you recall that from way back when? That wonderful old building that looks like it's haunted back here?
This
on
one?
The back street?
Yes.
You can't see it from here, can you? No. But it's back.
Which one was it?
It's
Which
called
one?
the
The red
Graves.
one, the one that I didn't recognize. That's another one of those things that I mentioned, staying on the main street and just visiting
Oh,
relatives.
the mansion. Yes,
I have
yes.
I have personally no recollection
Yes,
of that
yes,
at all.
I know what you're
I would have thought to kids that would be a haunted
well,
house.
let me tell you,
even
It may have
60
been.
years ago.
I don't remember.
For me, it was the site of my ballet lessons.
Oh, come
With
on.
with a woman named a teenager named Jean Marshall. She and her mother, and they're very, very high ceilings. She had a ballet bar in there. My mother wanted me to be graceful, so she sent me to ballet for 2 years, and the lessons then were $2.50 a lesson. I had a private
There you go.
lesson, and I do a little ballet with my granddaughter now. I taught my 2.5-year-old granddaughter to do the plie and the arabesque. Not that I'm a dancer, I'm not. But you see, my mother thought that was important. When she named me Sandra, I think she thought I was going to be a big star.
You're a big star now, kid.
We think you are. We
Better end on that note, Gordy.
oak trees begin with acorns. Just remember that. It's got to be a kick for you to be here today, John.
Well, it's wonderful because I know the efforts that she's applied to the project. I know how the distribution situations are developing, and they're developing very, very nicely. I know of people. Well, I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
The one comment I was going to finish. I know people who have the book and have read it twice because they felt that there was something more in it than they may have sped read it and then said, wait a minute, I should have slowed down and really enjoyed this. But regarding distribution, besides what my sisters mentioned in Florida and also in the Carolinas, we have some limited distribution in my neck of the woods down in Connecticut. We've done radio program down there and book signings, and it's available there. And here in the North Country, we're just now beginning to open it up some. We're in discussions with the Market Basket in Malone to carry it on an annual basis, Christmas gifts and other types of things. And we expect to hear back from them shortly, so we're hopeful that'll be our outlet over there. Today in Plattsburgh,
Cornerstone already has it.
Cornerstone has it, and there we'll be talking to and doing book signing, reading at Borders. Also, here in town, we're hopeful that the comments made by the ownership here at the local pharmacy to handle some of the books, which will make it convenient for these people. It'll be available in libraries, Peru, Keysville, and here in Sable. We'll be in Lake Placid on our way out on Wednesday morning to drop off a supply at the forgive me, Sandra, I've forgotten the name of the bookstore up there.
No, not necessarily a big. I'm doing a reading at the bookstore in Lake Placid.
Oh, great.
Okay. But of course, the book is always available through the website sprucehillpress.com. Correct? Mm-hmm. So it's the
credit card there.
Yeah.
Where did the idea of Spruce Hill come from?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. Let us end on that.
Oh,
Spruce Hill was the name. Was the name of the hill. My father, I told you, was worked for the welfare department, and he would come down. Spruce Hill comes, that big hill that comes down, and the big long. It comes and it keeps coming, and it has the big panoramic view in front of it. And he would come home after work in the winter and he'd say to my mother, "Oh, Joanne, it was a tough ride down Spruce Hill tonight." He said the car was sideways. I had to bring it back level, and he talked about Spruce Hill. So I live on a hill, and I called my house Spruce Hill, and I've called Spruce Hill Press. And the other thing is my logo, my 90-year-old father-in-law did the Spruce Hill Press. I don't know if you can get that, Calvin. He hand did that. He was a printer and a early graphic artist. And so so many things about this book are just, they're such gifts.
Just wonderful. Go back, and I just want to show what you and Johnny looked like. Calvin can get a shot of this. What age were you?
I have to look and see. We were 7 and 4.5, or 5 and 7.5.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
And you, where did you find all the old family photographs? I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but there's some great shots in this book.
I had them, and my friend that did the editing spent 3 days on the computer fixing the old photographs for me.
Really?
Yes. That was and that was a gift from her, Sue Sloan. Out in Indiana. The book was printed in Indiana, published out of Mars Hill. Let me give you my address, my P.O. box, where people can write to me, and they can order the book that way too. The P.O. box is Spruce Hill Press, P.O. Box 755, Mars Hill, North Carolina 28754. And I have an email, sprucehillpress@AOL.com.
We can't wait to find out what the future of Johnny
I'm
and
planning
me
on coming
is.
back next year to be with you, Gordon, and we'll talk about Buddy Holly.
Boy, won't that be fun. You're getting into my bailiwick now, having been in the radio business for a long, long time. Everything, events in all of our lives are connected with songs we knew and loved.
I'm going to use a lot of songs. Oh, by the way, just as a little on the side, I'm saying this for my wonderful husband because I'll have to end with this little vignette. I was Queen of the Hop in 1958. And I remind my husband of that at least once a week. And he says, "Oh, you're telling me again?" I said, "Bruce, someday you're going to be hearing this as though you're hearing it for the very first time."
I love it. I love it. Well, let us write another chapter as we end this chapter in your life and in the life of Au Forks and all the people your age and of any age who may have grown up here or who are growing up here now. It's a book that your kids can read. And they can read it now and they can read it when they're adults and compare the experiences, because how many books have you reread in your lifetime that had a completely different impression on you as an adult, like Gulliver's Travels and Alice in the Looking Glass?
This is based on Anna Green Gables.
So
I loved Anna Green Gables.
Didn't everybody? Everybody?
And also, let me just make one other quick comment. At our house on Broad Street, two little children, a new family has bought the house, I don't know how recently, and two children live there again. So Johnny said to me, "There we go again. Johnny and Sandra growing up country."
What goes around
comes around. It's been a pleasure.
I just wanted to remind everybody again of coming into the interview. We drove through town, and one thing I recognized, of course, was our area town and the metaphors that deal with the river. And I looked down and we went over it, and I said to Sandra, I said, "Well, there it is, rolling on down to the sea." I said, "I recognize the river. I wonder if it recognized me." After you read this book, you begin to think that the river actually has powers beyond its ability to flow downhill. But thank you very, very much for your time.
And it does, by the way. The river,
Calvin.
All waterways have great powers. We've talked about this river, and if we had a lot of time, we'd tell you about shows we've done with people who were here during Prohibition, when they were throwing the bottles over the bank. I wish I could see all your shows.
I wish they were down in North Carolina.
Gee,
extend that station.
If we had a big enough box, we'd send you a copy of every one. At the very least, I hope you get to see this one. Sandy, thanks so much for being with us. Good luck in everything you do.
Thank you. God bless you.
And
Thank you,
I will give you my email address before we leave so that you can keep me up to date on everything.
I will. Thank you. Thank you.
Isn't it fun? And who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.